The third part of topic 4 deals with the non-food plant industries which provide pleasure, tea, coffee, tobacco, and ornamentals for aesthetic uses, as well as plants for recreational uses. These are all dealt with in some detail in the last two modules of the subject, landscapes and turf grass, but we'll look briefly at their human footprint here. After looking at the challenges of obtaining food and industrial resources from plants, it may seem frivolous to consider the ways in which plants give pleasure. However, strong reasons for consuming or using plants in these ways lead to some of the most profitable plant-based industries. In rich countries, food consumption is driven as much by hedonic or pleasure-seeking factors as nutritional requirements. We consume particular foods because of the sensory stimuli of appearance, texture, taste, and aroma that they provide. Some examples include tobacco, which enhances moods or feelings. The same for beverage alcohol, which is derived from grains, hops, and other crops. We often see flowers as decorations in food presentation. Little value is added, but there is a footprint for this luxury item. Some gums are derived from plants, for example chewing gum. Corn syrup is now widely used as a sweetener, and many of us drink coffee, tea, and other stimulants which affect the footprint. While these all give pleasure, they all have issues. There are obvious issues with tobacco and alcohol to health. Addiction to these and other products benefits those who grow and deal in them. Many hectares of maize are now used to produce corn syrup, taking away productive food land. Growers have been looking for more profitable alternative crops and therefore diverting land to these instead of producing food. So good examples are developing tropical countries which produce coffee, sugar, tea, and spices for export instead of growing food for local consumption. Since Neolithic times, human beings have co-evolved with agricultural plants and animals. People have shaped plants and animals through selection and breeding. And these organisms have influenced our physiology, psychology, and sociology. As cities developed, people were less intimately involved with plants and animals in their daily lives. It's even possible that some forgot that bread, milk, and meat were once part of living organisms. However, people do retain an affinity for plants and animals. Our desire for pets and ornamental plants may be an aspect of a deep-seated human tendency that E.O. Wilson called biophilia. One of the most persistent, if minimal, expressions of biophilia is the desire for cut flowers or potted plants in the home or workplace. In cool, temperate areas, these plants are mostly produced in greenhouses. Because of the high market value of floral crops, greenhouse production can be more profitable than food production, especially in developing countries. Growing and shipping by air flowers from developing countries adds to our footprint. Lack of space and limited transportation encouraged intensive development of cities in the 19th century, where there was little room for plants where people lived. However, today nearly every home has plants in small gardens, window boxes, pots, and vases inside the home, or even on rooftops. In more recent times, urban planners have developed cities with extensive open spaces between houses and other buildings, together with green spaces, all very important in all Australian towns and cities. Built-up areas are expanding at a significant rate, and this expansion occurs at the expense of agricultural land. The Sydney Basin is a prime example. However, this has now created what we call the urban biome, where there are many ornamentals but little food production. In many instances, these urban biomes have their own issues. Many of them contain thousands of ornamental plants, often not native to the area in which they're grown. These have been brought by settlers wanting something from home in their new world, or modern residents want to recreate something exotic that they saw or learned about. An example is the flame lily, pictured here, which is the national flower emblem of my home country. And also many landscapes now have plants from diverse biomes, and a large part of the economic and environmental cost of landscapes results from the attempt to maintain these non-native plants. What is more, some have escaped and become important weeds or even invasive plants. Other issues in the urban biome is that many of the plants that are exotic are high maintenance plants. Often that means heavy fertilizer and pesticide use as a source of environmental pollution. The United States Environmental Protection Agency estimates that more pesticides, mainly herbicides, are used in lawns than in agronomic maize. The lush growth from using fertilizers and pesticides in the urban environment has created plant waste disposal issues, an additional contribution to the human footprint. However, all towns and cities in Australia have dealt with this by having collection and composting facilities. Now, this is best handled by creating native gardens with plants adapted to the Australian climate and soils, thereby requiring much less upkeep and inputs, but still maintaining an aesthetic environment. Greenhouses, nurseries, and sod farms provide most ornamental and recreational plants. In Australia, this is worth about $3 billion in nursery plants, turf, and cut flowers at the farm gate. The landscaping operations are estimated at about 2.6 billion. However, the industry is labor intensive, but it does employ 23,000 people in 1,600 businesses. So while the industry is labor and input intensive, it does provide jobs for locals, helps to reduce the urban footprint, and in some operations, they are able to recycle water and fertilizers. Now it's really important to watch the next video in part 3 of this module. This is a talk by Thomas Waltz, which is entitled From Landscape Architecture to Conservation Agriculture. Now, this presentation presents two examples of how multidisciplinary teams worked together to repair compromised, depleted, dilapidated ecological systems on farmland. This shows that reducing the impact of the human footprint is complicated and it's costly, but that it can be done.